Introduction. The moment before you act. There is a moment most people experience almost every day, yet rarely name. It happens quietly, often invisibly, and always right before something important. It's the moment just before you speak, before you raise your hand, before you send the message, ask the question, or step forward. Time seems to slow. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts suddenly grow louder than the room around you. And almost on cue, a familiar voice surfaces in your mind. Don't say it. This isn't the right time. What if you look foolish? That moment, small as it seems, is where lives subtly change direction. Not in dramatic ways, not all at once, but incrementally, through hesitation, through retreat, through choosing comfort over expression, silence over truth, safety over movement. Most people never consciously decide to play small. They simply pause and don't move. Over time, those pauses stack up. You speak a little less. You ask for a little less. You start editing yourself before the world ever gets a chance to respond. Not because you lack potential, but because fear quietly becomes the decision maker. Today, we're talking about that moment. I call it the shameless edge. The shameless edge is the thin line between action and withdrawal, between stepping forward while uncertain or stepping back to preserve comfort. It's the place where courage is either practiced or postponed. If you've ever frozen in a high-stakes moment, whether it was speaking up in a meeting, setting a boundary in a relationship, asking for what you deserve, or finally pursuing a dream you keep telling yourself you'll get to someday, this is for you. Because the edge shows up everywhere. It appears in careers when your ideas stay locked inside your head, in creativity when perfectionism keeps you polishing instead of publishing, in relationships when honesty feels riskier than resentment, and in life when waiting feels safer than becoming visible. This isn't a video about motivation. It's not about hype or confidence or pretending fear doesn't exist. It's about understanding why fear shows up, what it costs you when you obey it, and how repeated vulnerable action slowly reshapes your identity. In this essay, we'll break the shameless edge into three parts. First, we'll define what the edge actually is and why your brain resists it so strongly. Second, we'll expose the hidden cost of playing small, the quiet tax hesitation collects over time. And finally, we'll talk about how people become unflinching, not fearless, but grounded in self-trust. Because courage isn't loud. It's the decision to step forward, even when no one is clapping yet. Part 1, the shameless edge. Picture yourself in a moment where something meaningful is at stake. You're sitting in a meeting and an idea forms in your mind, one that could change the direction of the conversation. You're halfway through writing a message that matters, your finger hovering over send. You're standing in front of someone, feeling the urge to say what you really think, what you really need. And then it happens. Your body reacts before your mind can catch up. Your heart rate jumps, your breathing tightens, your thoughts scatter just enough to make stillness feel safer than movement. A voice appears, not loud, not dramatic, but convincing. This isn't the right moment. Someone else will say it better. What if this goes badly? That moment is the shameless edge. Most people assume this hesitation means they're not confident enough, not ready, or not cut out for bold action. But that interpretation misses what's really happening. This response isn't weakness, it's wiring. Your brain evolved in a world where social rejection wasn't uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Being excluded from the group once meant losing protection, food, and survival itself. So your nervous system learned to treat embarrassment, disagreement, and visibility as threats. That's why your body reacts as if something serious is at risk, because biologically it believes there is. Understanding this matter, because it removes the shame from fear. Fear doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. But here's where most people get stuck. They assume fear is a signal to stop. In reality, fear is a signal that you're at the edge of growth. The shameless edge is the space where action feels uncomfortable, precisely because it matters. It's where your current identity is being challenged by a larger one trying to emerge. This is why boldness often looks effortless from the outside. We see someone speak clearly, publish consistently, or take risks, and assume they're wired differently. But what we're really seeing is someone who has crossed the edge enough times that fear no longer gets the final vote. Boldness isn't a personality trait, it's a practiced response. One of the clearest places we see this is in creative work. Perfectionism often masquerades as discipline or high standards, but underneath it is avoidance. It's the desire to feel safe before being seen. Yet studies on creativity and learning consistently show that people who release imperfect work early progress faster. Not because they're more talented, but because feedback replaces imagination. Imagination magnifies fear. Reality corrects it. The longer you wait to act, the scarier the edge becomes. Not because the risk increases, but because your mind fills the silence with worst-case scenarios. J.K. Rowling's story is a perfect example. Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, she was a single mother living on welfare, facing rejection after rejection. 12 publishers said no. Each rejection was another chance to retreat, to decide the edge was too sharp. Fear didn't disappear for her. It never does. She simply refused to let it decide. That's the defining feature of the shameless edge. Action without guarantees. Not certainty, not confidence, just movement. And here's the quiet truth most people overlook. Every time you step forward while fear is present, you weaken fear's authority. You teach your nervous system that discomfort isn't danger, that visibility isn't fatal, that you can survive being seen. The edge doesn't vanish, but it loses its power. Your task isn't to eliminate fear. It's to act before fear finishes its argument. Today, that doesn't mean doing something dramatic. It means one small, unpolished act of courage. Send the message without rewriting it 5 times. Share the idea before it feels perfect. Take the step before certainty arrives, because certainty never comes first. Part 2. The cost of playing small. Now that you can feel the shameless edge, we need to talk about the other side of it. Because hesitation doesn't feel dangerous, it feels reasonable, it feels careful, it feels like maturity. That's what makes it so costly. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. If it did, we might question it. Instead, it disguises itself as logic. Be patient. Don't rush things. Wait until you're more prepared. On the surface, these sound wise, responsible even, but over time, they quietly train you to shrink. Playing small almost never looks like failure in the moment. It looks like restraint. It looks like humility. It looks like not rocking the boat. And because of that, it often goes unchallenged. But playing small is not neutral. It charges interest. In psychology and behavioral economics, this shows up clearly in the concept of loss aversion. Research led by Daniel Kahneman demonstrates that humans experience losses roughly twice as powerfully as gains. In simple terms, we feel the pain of losing something far more intensely than the pleasure of gaining something new. So, we protect what we have, even when what we have is limiting us. In finances, this looks like hoarding opportunities instead of investing in growth. People cling to security, not realizing that stagnation is also a form of risk. Inflation erodes savings, time erodes options, yet doing nothing feels safer than making a move that could go wrong. In careers, playing small often looks like staying quiet while your ideas are slowly claimed by others. You tell yourself you're being respectful, patient, professional. Meanwhile, people with no better ideas, but more willingness to speak, move ahead. Research on grit and long-term career success consistently shows that self-advocacy matters. Not arrogance, not entitlement. Visibility. If no one knows what you're capable of, they can't reward it. Socially, the cost is even subtler. Playing small looks like avoiding difficult conversations, swallowing boundaries to keep the peace, staying agreeable to remain liked. In the short term, this feels like harmony. In the long term, it breeds resentment, distance, and loneliness. When you repeatedly choose silence over honesty, people don't feel closer to you. They know less about you. The cruel irony is that the very behaviors we use to preserve belonging often erode it over time. The most dangerous part of playing small is that its cost doesn't arrive all at once. It compounds quietly. Missed conversations, unpursued ideas, versions of yourself that never get tested. You don't wake up one day and realize you've abandoned your potential. You drift away from it slowly, through 1,000 tiny decisions to stay comfortable. History gives us plenty of counterexamples, moments where playing it safe would have been understandable, even applauded. In 2008, Elon Musk faced a decision that could have ended his career entirely. Both Tesla and SpaceX were failing. He had enough money left to save one company, but not both. Playing safe would have meant choosing the more stable option, preserving what remained. Instead, he split everything between them. At the time, it looked reckless. In hindsight, it reshaped entire industries. This isn't an argument for gambling or blind risk. It's a reminder that inaction carries consequences too. We just don't feel them immediately. Action hurts now, inaction hurts later, and later tends to be far more expensive. The tragedy isn't that people fail. Failure teaches. Failure sharpens. Failure often leads somewhere better. The tragedy is that many never test themselves at all. They live within the narrow boundaries fear sets for them, mistaking comfort for safety and familiarity for fulfillment. The shameless edge keeps appearing, offering a quiet invitation forward. And each time you step back, the edge doesn't disappear, it waits. Part 3, Becoming the Person Who Doesn't Flinch. At the deepest level, fear isn't really about embarrassment. It's about belonging. We tell ourselves we're afraid of looking foolish, but what we're actually afraid of is disconnection, being judged, misunderstood, excluded, or quietly pushed to the edges of the group. This is why so many people avoid conflict, postpone difficult conversations, and leave important things unsaid. Silence feels safer than honesty. Agreement feels safer than truth. Delay feels safer than commitment. But safety and fulfillment are not the same thing. The people who appear unflinching aren't immune to fear. They've simply learned something most people never practice: self-trust. Not the kind built through affirmations or confidence tricks, but the kind built through repeated action under uncertainty. One of the clearest expressions of this is boundaries. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls, cold, rigid lines that push people away. In reality, boundaries are acts of clarity. They tell the truth early, before resentment has time to grow. Research consistently shows that people who set clear boundaries experience less burnout, healthier relationships, and deeper trust over time. When you avoid boundaries, you don't preserve harmony. You postpone conflict and make it more painful when it finally arrives. The same principle applies to dreams. Unfinished dreams hurt not because they're unrealistic, but because they remind us of untested potential. Each time you think about them, you're confronted with a quiet question. What kind of person would I be if I actually tried? Many people avoid that question by staying busy, distracted, or practical. But avoidance doesn't erase the desire. It just turns it into self-doubt. Returning to an old dream, even imperfectly, does something powerful. It restores trust in yourself. It proves that you don't need certainty to begin, only willingness. This is why courage compounds. Every time you act at the shameless edge, you send a message to your nervous system: I can survive this. Over time, fear loses its authority. It still shows up, but it no longer controls the outcome. A powerful real-world example of this kind of grounded courage is Malala Yousafzai. At just 15 years old, she survived an assassination attempt for advocating girls' education. Most people, after experiencing something so traumatic, would retreat into silence. That would have been understandable, even encouraged. Instead, she spoke louder. Not because she was fearless, but because she refused to let fear shrink her voice. Her courage wasn't loud or aggressive. It was steady, purpose-driven, rooted in values rather than reactions. That's what unflinching looks like. Not bravado, not recklessness, but alignment. Healthy conflict follows the same pattern. It isn't about dominance or winning, it's about clarity. Saying what needs to be said calmly, directly, and without apology. The relationships that survive your honesty are the ones strong enough to grow with you. And the ones that don't, they were never sustained by truth to begin with. Over time, something subtle shifts. You stop asking, what if this goes wrong? And start asking, what happens if I don't act? Fear becomes background noise instead of a command. You still feel it, but it no longer defines you. You become someone who moves forward not because it's comfortable, but because it's honest, not fearless. just unflinching. Conclusion, you step forward. Anyway, the shameless edge isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with a big moment or a clear signal. It shows up quietly, often disguised as hesitation, overthinking, or the urge to wait just a little longer. And yet, it's one of the most important places you'll ever stand. Because the edge is where identity is formed. Every time you pause and retreat, you reinforce a version of yourself that stays small, safe, and unseen. And every time you step forward, while fear is still present, you reinforce something else entirely, self-trust. This isn't about eliminating fear. Fear is human. Fear is ancient. Fear will always have something to say. The difference is whether you let it make decisions. Research consistently shows that over time, people regret the things they didn't do far more than the risks they took. Failure stings, but it fades. Inaction lingers. It turns into quiet questions that surface late at night. What if I had tried? What if I hadn't waited so long? The shameless edge asks you to answer those questions in advance, not by being reckless, not by being loud, but by being honest. Honest about what you want, honest about what matters, honest enough to move before certainty arrives. The next time fear shows up, and it will, don't rush to silence it. Pause, notice it, let it exist. Then step forward anyway. Send the message, speak the truth. Take the step that aligns with who you're becoming, not who you've been trying to protect. Because the version of you on the other side of that action, the one with more clarity, more self-respect, and more momentum, is counting on you. If this gave you clarity, hit like so others can find it. Subscribe for more no-nonsense mindset shifts, and let me know in the comments. What's one bold move you're committing to this week? Yeah, thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.